When people think of reality, it's typically a combination of raw mathematical equations loosely tying into larger, more complex theories, visceral grand images, visuals of the wider universe, or the personal, sensory feeling of existing. I think of penguins, emperor penguins to be precise, not just because they're experts at swimming, but because they're a great example of what reality means to me as someone who experiences it. It's not just that they typically live in an Arctic biome, it's that what they experience and only experience is an Arctic biome. It's that their understanding of what reality is snow and cold, oceans and vast landscapes, fish and fish food. Truly, things we take as so natural will be so unnatural to them. What they consider natural would likely be unnatural to us. If they had the self-awareness to be able to, they might look at our cities with the same mysticism and unknowing we look towards the stars. Penguins thinking of the deserts, Greenland, and our metropolitan cities as unnatural as we see the Arctic, as, for lack of a better word, alien. I mention this because when discussing reality beyond formulas, there's an almost preemptive strategy to discussing it. We have to detach ourselves from the only thing we know of, our lives, to make sense of our lives, like trying to observe a room while inside it. No matter how we phrase it or view it or perceive it, the perspective is being filtered through us in the room. We can't escape from our own perspective and can only learn from others what the view looks like for them. If I was to think of the reality and lived experience of this room, it would likely be different from how you think of it. I can only understand reality in the parts of it I have experienced, and even then, empathy fails as a substitute for experience. I have no idea what it is like to be a penguin. I have no idea how you also see this room. And no matter how much I could learn about penguins, how many paintings or bits of prose you could make about how you view this room, I will never experience that. With our shared existence and our limited perspectives, we are seeing a snowflake in a snowstorm, a leaf in a forest, a person in a species, a world in a universe. Our perception of reality is limited at a fundamental level and at a deeper level, kind of like our relationship with There seems to be a shared experience growing up at a micro level, this realization with color. My red could be different from your red, classic color theory. Our entire red understanding could be different, and yet we interact with the world exactly the same. We are interacting with the exact same reality, but seeing such a literal different outlook. This is different than simply color blindness or dichromacy. This is called the inverted spectrum, where people see opposite colors but aren't aware of the difference. Let's say two people see an apple and they both agree it's red, but while they both agree it's red, the red they are agreeing on is different. One person's red is this, the other's is this, and one person's green is this, and the other's green is this. The thing is, person with outlook number 2 isn't actually wrong, or in some way fundamentally categorically wrong, or wrong in a way we could prove, or wrong in a way where someone could know or communicate they see differently. They perceive all of the normal human spectrum of light, they have no deficiency, it's just inverted. Maybe my green is your red, and you will never know as you can't see my green. The opposite nature of the two doesn't matter as we communicate with the exact same label. And even if we could somehow reach an awareness of the difference, no matter how much I can tell you that's my green, you won't be able to experience my green. The thought experiment itself is just a thought experiment because there is no way to measurably test whether we see colors differently without obvious clear deficiencies like color blindness, let alone communicate or demonstrate it. Now, with this in mind, you may be thinking, okay, but my green is the right green, my color palette is the correct one, and I see reality for what it is, in all of its darkness, in all of its brightness, in all of its greens, in all of its reds. No, you don't. Our eyes can only see a certain spectrum of light. Most human eyes only typically see within the range of 400 to 700 wavelength in nanometers. It varies individual to individual, but the majority fall generally within this range, meaning most of humanity misses out on viewing infrared or UV lights. So if you were to see quote-unquote true red with the human eye, you're really seeing the agreed upon human definition of what red is. You're siding with the majority, not seeing the objective reality. You may notice I use the word most when describing this spectrum. That's because of the condition aphakia, where people have eyes without lenses. People who don't have a lens in their eye are actually able to see ultraviolet. The lens absence allows the eye to see a wider spectrum of light as the lens isn't there to absorb or block the UV. In fact, a painter actually developed the condition. Late in his life, Claude Monet developed cataracts. As his lens degraded, they blocked parts of the visible spectrum and the colors he perceived grew muddy. Monet's cataracts left him struggling to paint. He complained to friends that he felt as if he saw everything in a fog. After years of failed treatments, he agreed at age 82 to have the lens of his left eye completely removed. Light could now stream through the opening unimpeded. Monet could now see familiar colors again. And he could also see colors he had never seen before. Flowers remained one of his favorite subjects, only now the flowers were different. When most people look at water lily flowers, they appear white. After his cataract surgery, Monet's blue-toned pigments could grab some of the UV light bouncing off of the petals. He then started to paint the flowers a whitish blue. Now, from hearing that, you might get the idea that people with this condition are seeing, with perfect clarity, new colors and sensations, and it might be an almost enviable state. In reality, having aphakia is quite blurry, you can have problems seeing things that are close to you, and there are consistent headaches. It is not a nice condition to have, but it is a good demonstration of what I mean. The lens is limiting our perception of reality to see only what is necessary, likely due to evolution. The body itself is constraining its view of objective reality to deem what is necessary for us, and thus creating an individual reality of perception for humans to live through, or, as I like to put it, an inherent solipsistic perception of an objective reality. Solipsism is the idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. It's a philosophy that takes self-assuredness as the only true axiom or god. I am the only thing that I know can be real, all else is in doubt or questionable. It originates formally from these two, but really descends, like a lot of Western philosophy, in concept from Descartes' famous quote and by extension his most famous book. But whereas Descartes methodically bit by bit wrote off everything in his book to arrive at one axiom he couldn't disprove and one thing he knew to be true and to exist, people who believe in solipsism believe themselves as the only thing that is true, the only thing to exist. In fact, at the very far end of the spectrum, there are those that believe that the universe only exists when they view it, a sort of main character syndrome taken to its logical extreme. While the belief that I am all there is to know and to exist is silly to me, not just because of its undeniable narcissism, blind certainty, and the classic paradox of, well, where did you come from if you are all there is? What made you? Why out of every biological shape were you this combination? While that belief is silly to me, the biological reality of our perception is that it is individual, and in a sense, my slice of what existence is, our species' slice of what existence is solipsistic. Not that it is the only thing to exist, but the only thing I experience, the only thing we experience. I think without the idea even in the head or the language to describe it, everyone would likely agree that every single species has its own solipsistic experience and understanding of reality, demonstrated in its lifestyle and lived through its senses, form of communication, and living that seems so vastly different despite the shared landscape we inhabit. A bat sees through echolocation, a garden snail through a black and white blur. Mantis shrimps have 16 different color photoreceptors in comparison to our 3. They see not only our perception of light, far red and ultraviolet, but also polarized light, where waveforms oscillate in only one directional plane. In all our different views of reality, we are alone together, or in the Latin words, a solus ipse. Our way of capturing reality works in similar ways. Cameras are a good example. Aren't they objectively snapshotting visually what we see around us? No. For around 100 years, the only way cameras could snapshot that reality was with 2 colors varying in light, and now what was once the only way to present reality visually has now just become a director or editor's stylistic choice. This is honestly one of the best examples of what I'm talking about. Something we thought was the ceiling of our understanding of reality, or snapshotting reality, really just highlighted how far we have to go. Now we have 8K, motion blur, on-demand streaming, infinite contrast, and perfect black. This process happened in every industry. In the 90s and 2000s, people looked at games like Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and the original Halo thinking this is the peak of graphical fidelity. Now we have ray tracing and games launching without any features. Oh, how far we've come. Audio-wise, songs from before and during the mid-60s used exclusively mono sound as opposed to stereo, because stereo, in its infancy, was seen as more of a gimmick, and music producers didn't want to gamble, placing their bets on an experimental sound. When the shift happened, it was messy and had a large adjustment period. That's why when you listen to some Beatles songs, they can appear to just sing in one headphone and play instruments in the other. The producers didn't realize how to properly balance it. Regardless, over time, stereo, once thought of as a gimmick or a trend, is now the dominant way producers record tracks. Sticking with music, Walkman digital libraries in the 80s and 90s were seen as massive. Just 20 to 25 tracks, then the iPod came in having over 1,000 songs, and now with streaming, we have near infinite music and limited time. Do you see what I'm getting at? Constantly, in human invention, what was seen as the benchmark or the ceiling was just the first or second level of a skyscraper. Is it possible that this same process is happening with our body, experience, and perception? What if, as an old camera's black and white is limited at snapshotting reality, the human eye is a primitive way of seeing reality and we could expand its horizons? What if, and hear me out here, as Halo was limited by the confines of the Xbox's original hardware, the human body is limited at experiencing reality, and we could build upon it to experience more of it. AKA, we will make the human body as akin to the Xbox 360, and life, or Halo, will become Halo 3. Halo Reach if we're daring enough. Just as we add higher resolution to games, we could increase human sight to perceive beyond the normal 400 to 7 nanometer visible spectrum. Is it possible that our descendants might alter the natural human eye to see these shades of light we can't, and our current vision will be retroactively viewed as primitive? Pimp My Ride the TV show, except it's Pimp My Eyes. Just as our libraries of music was once limited to 20 songs, what if we made it so the human ear can listen to pitches it previously couldn't? The deep call of whales, dog whistles, the celestial sound of space, things that we imagine or fill in the blanks with, rather than experience intrinsically, like the sound of wind or thunder. The main trick I've had with writing this video is not sounding too obvious, because this idea obviously is obvious. Yes, we should allow ourselves the ability to see more than we do, but the implications really aren't. I've talked about transhumanism and changing the infrastructure of humanity before, but that was regarding mortality, putting off our biological fate to witness more of what we already do. But perception allows you to see and experience more of creation, and frankly, can have more radical changes than time or prevention of death ever could. And I think this is best explained by talking about. Remember how I was talking about the inverted spectrum? How two people can look at and live in the same reality but see such a different outlook, and we will never get to experience the difference? This isn't limited to just individuals, and also is in a sense a proven phenomenon. Species have their own type of inverted spectrum, or at least the same process of seeing the same reality completely differently. Let's say you were taking your dog for a walk on a path in the forest. You're experiencing the same track, you're relatively close to each other, keeping at a similar pace. And barring the height difference, you're living in a moment together relatively in the same place. Despite all of this, you are experiencing that place so fundamentally differently. Your dog is almost subconsciously smelling chemical trails left by previous hikers hours ago. He knows what path they took and the variety of food items they were carrying. The path to him is a history book of smell, while you can only smell the contemporary objects around you. You notice while passing through some native violet plants and stop to look at them for a while, the way they sway in the breeze and the sharp contrast from the green of the weeds below them. He can't see that, because his eye having completely different stories. And it's not isolated to this path, of course. It's life generally. There's a realization everyone who lives in a solipsistic reality long enough eventually comes to. I know very little of what existence is like. I only know what my existence is like. I really just have an agreed upon consensus that I live in, while knowing that it could be completely different with biological changes I see in the animals beside me. Termites can only view through black and white. If they were to reach our level of intellect, their toolkit of metaphors and language would just be in that and of that black and white world. That's the only means of which they know of and can express. If they were to suddenly see color like us, it would completely uproot their understanding of their own existence. And so similarly to the termites, what things have we not experienced that would completely alter our view on reality? Just as there are shades of light we cannot see, what if there are shades of existence we haven't reached, experienced, or knew possible? We have a limited amount of taste receptors. What would happen if we had a billion taste receptors and we tried to eat an ice cream or a bag of chips? How different would it taste, now with 1,000 nuanced details so much more complex and varied than we know of? Would we rewrite a lot of our adjectives or add a library of new ones, as what we know of as simply delicious, or sweet, or bitter is such a fraction of what the heights and lows of taste really could be or bring out? What if we could see entire landscapes that take on new dimensions, heat signatures, magnetic and energy fields painting the world in ways we've never dreamed but were always there? From binaural beats to bubblegum pop, we know how much certain frequencies can affect our mood and behavior. If we could have hearing that could account for a pitch beyond our typical range, could we make music that resonates with parts of our biology and spirit we've never consciously known possible, opening up realizations of how little we knew, felt, and operated under before? Is a termite seeing in a supposedly true reality? Am I? Can I truly ever? Ultimately, it is a consensus of illusion that this basis of human experience and body is what existence is like. Solipsism and the innate state of human living unconsciously tricks us into thinking that this is all there is, that this is some complete, all-encompassing and widely resonant vision that is the true one. A lot of this is subconscious. While a mind can accept there are things beyond it, a body can only know what it experiences. And I think it is one of the most exciting realizations of living. We are seeing such a narrow slice of what all this really is. You could read every book ever written in every language, listen to every song, watch every YouTube video, meet every single person, and you'd still see and experience such a fraction of experience. You could capture the human experience of what reality is to a T, to the point where it is literally an accurate recreation of every little micro detail we see, hear, and dream, and still, that would be a limited view of what the totality of what capturing all of existence really would be, because it's filtered and constrained by our own biology. It's still just Halo CE, it's not Halo 3. This goes beyond our innate vision and carries over into our thought. When we picture dying, it's never-ending blackness. Why is that? Well, it's because there are only two conceptions that go beyond our day-to-day experience of light: blinking and rest. Darkness is naturally associated subconsciously with the absence of something. When we go to sleep, we see the blackness and darkness of shut-out light, which ironically is still earthly perception. Your eyeballs don't actually change. It's just that the back of our eyelids cut us off from seeing light. If you were to shine a light on the eyelids, you can see your veins and skin. You're technically always seeing. That's why when people sleep with their eyes open, they can still experience the same process of unconsciousness. It's virtually the same process because the state of consciousness is primarily regulated by the brain, not the eyes. Vision has very little to do with it. In a state of sleep, the parts of our consciousness that manage and produce vision are at minimal use. My perception of death as a black nothingness is an illusion my body has been reinforcing every time I go to sleep. Even though I experience unconsciousness due to my brain, I conceptualize it as if the blacked out shut off light of my eyelid is unconsciousness. What I imagine as nothing or beyond something is still a construction built from my living, limited experience and senses, as if the absence of light is any way applicable to the absence of consciousness. I envy the creature who may one day or more presently see beyond this. Be beyond the awareness of this limitation while still bound by it, so limited in ideas to what my framework is, so limited in time and body what I can do with my time and body, so much time wasted being self-aware while wasting it, that I'm wasting it, always knowing deep down that there is so much more to me, but constantly having to do things that have nothing to do with me, so ever controlled by It is truly terrifying how much the neurochemicals in our brain impact the way we experience reality and creation, especially considering how universal and intrinsic our experience seems to the wider universe and its organisms. For example, jellyfish don't actually feel pain. While they have instincts to run away from predators, they don't have pain receptors. Something that is so innate to us, seems so inbuilt into what the condition of living is like, is just experienced in the human condition. I will never know what it is like to live a life without the sensation of pain. It will never experience a life with it. Both of these default states intertwine with how we view life and how we experience it. Would a jellyfish fear the biome it resides in if it could feel pain? Would I feel no hesitation to climb a mountain, to go on railway tracks, if I couldn't? Invisible mechanisms neither of us are conscious of are guiding our reactions in life more than our free will or thoughts alone ever could. And this isn't even mentioning how much our everyday condition and changing state can impact how we live and experience. The drifting in and out of emotions, the mood swings, the heartbreaks, the reaction to events, the messy, tangled web of seemingly unrelated, related things that bother us and bring us joy in a roller coaster-like fashion, and the absolutely unfree servitude we have to them. For example, you could listen to one of the most beautiful, gut-wrenching, reality-redefining pieces of music, but you couldn't really enjoy it for being such because you're sleep-deprived while listening. It doesn't matter fundamentally how good it is. Your brain's desire for sleep overrides the comprehension of the art you're listening to. I could write one of the most profound statements in all of human history, but if you're hungover listening to it, you probably can't enjoy it or take in its meaning. So much of what we take for granted as objective or true is filtered through, influenced, mutated, and muted by brain chemistry. Anyone who's taken mood stabilizers or antidepressants, antipsychotics, or even shrooms, weed, or more recreational drugs will know that our experience of reality can be so dramatically different depending on the pathways and reuptake of certain neurochemicals. In abundance, you can drug yourself to the point where you can't feel pain, where you could probably be okay with dying. And, in abundance, you can go through a withdrawal that no matter how strong you are mentally, will break you in a way that will seem in the moment near impossible to bounce back from. The interdependence on stability and the chaos that we have to constantly compromise with in ourselves and the world around us makes it seem like we are stuck with a primitive toolbox trying to do tasks with surgical precision, leading to frustration when our bodies, which were designed for simple hunter-gathering, can't properly handle the concept of an infinite universe, the limited body it's viewing it from, and the limited time it has to make sense of it in an increasingly accelerating world. While undoubtedly a generalization, the more intelligent we get about how powerless we are, the more we need external motivators like drugs to provide the stability the universe rarely provides us, because the body can't really comprehend the actual reality it's in. Yes, at a perceptual level of knowledge, solipsism, and vision, but also at an existential level, as it wasn't designed to. As simplistic as it sounds, humans have not yet truly adapted or evolved to be this self-aware of each other or the place we are living in. Think about, not just experience, things beyond their solipsistic existence and beyond the relatively tiny social groups and tribes of our ancient ancestors. But regardless of that inability, that hasn't stopped us from doing it anyway. Being plugged into never-ending sensory data, seeing and plotting out constellations far beyond what one man alone could see or experience naturally. Being aware of world-ending events that, no matter their likelihood, are always possible. Overwhelmed seems like the natural state of the human condition nowadays, dealing with demons we should have never had to experience and were never meant to. No doubt the rise in freak-out videos, anxiety, and the monetization of both has led to a culture that revels in feeding you things designed to make you fearful, angry, and afraid, then sell you a solution that makes you feel like you're making progress, like it doesn't affect you, when it's actually just natural to feel bad about all this. The problem is not you for feeling pain. The problem is what is causing you pain. The widespread response has been to shut out or numb ourselves to this. That's the adaptation that's taken place, making yourself so separate from what you go through or experience or watch that it doesn't matter how bad it gets, so you can see the world burn and not cry out as the flame engulfs you. And this works. For a while, until years of resentment, unspoken desperation, and things that have always bothered you come forefront on a day you didn't think you'd recognize. Whether it be a song you haven't heard in years, or a passing of a loved one, or a build-up until you crack, or something as mundane as roadkill, that numbness tumbles like a house of cards, and just as common as the numbness that so many feel is the overwhelming rush when it all comes back. Years of feeling nothing turns into a night or day where you feel everything. For a little bit, everything passes through you instead of over you. For a little bit, you're so flooded with thoughts it feels like you can't think. For a little bit, it seems like your own body is betraying you and allowing you to feel depths of pain you didn't know you could reach. For a little bit, it feels like you've been holding onto a guardrail you should have never let go of, and this is the tipping point where you'll never get to grab it again. And then it passes, like an exhale after the storm has passed, and you can breathe again. Breakdowns can be therapeutic and necessary to confront emotions, a decompression that forces us to actually address what we tend to avoid. It's sad that too often it comes to breakdowns or crying because we often don't have enough time or feel like we don't have enough to really process what our lives have been like and what we've had to deal with. Personally, I don't cry at all. This isn't me flexing that I'm uber masculine or stoic or something. I hate it and it sucks. I used to be able to cry as a kid, and as I grew into my teenage years, I almost grew distant from my own emotions. I could still feel sad, but the emotional build-up that leads to even a penultimate release vanished from me. I didn't get that House of Cards moment. People I would deeply care about would pass away and I wouldn't be able to properly grieve them like I should be doing. Like I knew would actually help me process it, and I didn't know why. It became like a special event when I could. Initially, it gave me the illusion that I was more in control of my emotions in life than I was, that I don't have the quote-unquote weakness of being overwhelmed by emotion. But it actually resulted in a slow but steady build-up of bitterness and resentment. Control was the last thing I felt. Dealing with so much, feeling stuck, like there would never be a release, generally hard to pinpoint anesthesia, mixed with the yearning to feel something, feeling, like so many do nowadays, completely at the breaking point, but never actually reaching it, and yet never getting that breakdown when my body has had enough, and I get a release. I got out of it by something I'll talk about at the end, but I dealt with it during by something I'll share now. Often in philosophy, it's not the actual methodology or back and forth arguing that sticks out or is memorable in culture or our own subconscious. It's a particular line, phrase, or idiom that encapsulates an idea or spirit in a neatly wrapped linguistic bow. Sometimes, wise or thought-provoking phrases we can say to almost prove that we read this book or listened to this speaker, because we've forgotten 90% of what they wrote a year after reading or listening to it. Or lines that provide people with the comfort and pursuit of feeling like they've learned something that encapsulates an idea that sparks something in them enough to remember it. It can be a shield against the pain of the world, it can be something you've always thought but never seen expressed, or it could be something you've never thought that you wish you had. It can explain something you've never been able to. It is so enticing and fun and passionate in youth to first fall down the rabbit hole and read from so many different people who've thought such wildly different or similar things to you. Thinking someone's terrible, going back years later thinking they're a genius, and vice versa. Loving someone and going back and realizing they're an idiot. Falling in and out of love with different thinkers and theories and ways of approaching life. As a kid, I just read and read and read and watched art that satiated the feelings I couldn't properly feel. Biologically deprived, I felt, if my body couldn't provide it, maybe reading this, on a spiritual and intellectual level, could. I developed an almost addiction to it. Probably one of the healthiest addictions you could have, but an addiction nonetheless. The stagnancy and fixed nature of authors was a direct contrast from the hyper, manic, and attention-seeking culture I grew up in. Not that philosophers were not attention-seeking or manic, most of them are, but more so that they actually had to stand the test of time and have their work eventually disconnected from their era. Dead authors don't need to stay eternally relevant with the churning change of hands of whatever's contemporary popular at the time. Devoid of the need of fame or approval, it was refreshing to retreat into theory and personal insights without them needing to make it a part of something ongoing. Their divergency in often strange language, brutality, and romanticism of the world made it a dichotomy in presentation and viewing from the sanitized, market-heavy, and group consumer-focused one I live in. In an era of rage bait, I read authors who hated themselves more than they could hate anything else or did, who bared their entire soul out on the table, and the viewer's left to figure out if it's a painting or a mess. In an era that seems focused on distraction, I read people who write lines so brutal you couldn't distract yourself and just sit with the thoughts that tortured them. In an era of, again, numb compliance, I read about people who embodied resilience in everything they did, and made the very act of living itself a rebellion. As I read, I noticed intimate things both of us had thought or felt at completely different timeframes and locations, an almost shared oneness in existential troubles and despairs, lusts, vices, and virtue, scraps of what it was like for them, helping what it is like for me, a collection of silent prayers to themselves, ruminations to keep themselves sane with the troubles of their life and existence in general. You get the picture. With the good writers in a single page, I could read a lifetime's worth of frustrations, longing, and growth that felt the opposite of the almost disposable, consumeristic culture I grew up in. These works that had become relics, ironically, had more precedence and importance in my life than the culture I was born into. I've poorly explained what I've just explained twice already in my work, but I can't overemphasize how much I love this unique format of learning and empathizing with someone and how big an impact it had on me. Almost every other format of information almost debases itself to wrestle and cater to your attention, but a book makes you pay attention to it. There's a purity with no dilution. The one-on-one nature of an author's text and a reader's experience, barring physicality, is genuinely one of the most intimate ways you can know another person's psyche. The actual process of reading, during, beforehand, and afterwards, is so much more individualistic, quiet, and slow than modern-day learning and sharing. There's no noise, both culturally and sensorily. While the same can be said at a base level for other art forms, they've been twisted by modern platforms, either by being in constant comparison to something else, or not letting you sit for a second with it after it's finished. It's nice to experience something without being seduced by other things on a sidebar, or something autoplaying directly after. And so many people nowadays are not just bombarded by so much content to watch, but so much conversation around what they watch. It's also nice to experience something without someone yelling in your ear beforehand or afterwards that it sucks or is a masterpiece. The after effect culturally of this constant commentary is consumers who are insecure about watching art without immediately rushing to see what someone else thought about it, as if they're afraid to like or dislike something without approval first. Even here on YouTube, many people read comments before watching a video for themselves. The process of watching art for so many people has become about being a part of a conversation rather than actually seeing a new perspective, being entertained or feeling something, as if the conversation is the experience and the art is the process to get to that. For the umpteenth time, again as a contrast, nobody is really rushing to make biting commentary on the Enrichidon. It's not that profitable and I'd have to purposely seek out commentary on it, which I didn't and will not because it's personal in a way I wouldn't want outside discussion. This period of my life might be described as some form of escapism, and I agree, but it felt the opposite during and in retrospect from the traditional escaping pain through comfort that the term implies. It didn't feel like a comfort at all. My body couldn't process emotions, so I confronted my pain head on through forcing it to analyze myself and my existence, feel and recognize pain in a different way than the senses, escape more so into feeling reality than from reality. The deeper I went, the more I read, despite my emotional numbness, I never felt more invested to live and experience and just be. I could see from writer to writer this really interesting lineage of how ideas developed over time and slowly formed society into what it is currently. I could see mindsets and talking points today that were derived from ancients then, using similar methodology. Quickly, I knew I liked the ones who were cocky, self-absorbed pricks, because I had just recently discovered I was a cocky, self-absorbed prick. I would read their books and highlight their messages, and later put them in my notes app or journal. And as I did, I would sometimes write my own little insights, building a personal library of quotes and paragraphs that stood out to me. There's probably hundreds of different people I've read and recorded that have shaped me in major or minor ways into the writer and person I am. The process I was doing mimics a unique form of the hedonic treadmill. For those not in the know, it's where, despite major positive or negative events and or life changes, your rate of happiness fluctuates roughly to the same place, or at least you don't feel any complacency with your current rate of happiness seeking out more. This is observed through myths like wealth leading to happiness, where it often leads to the opposite, to easily observable feelings like hunger and saturation. You feel full, then feel hungry, constantly solving the problem only to have to solve it again. You've likely felt it if you wanted to be a thing or do a thing and for an extended amount of time thought, once I do this, I'll be happy, I'll be satisfied. And now you are that thing or you have done that goal and you want to be or do another thing or do another goal. Its influence in behavior is so widespread that a large portion of human behavior models tie in or copy its process and outcome. I propose that I was in the philosophical treadmill, a term I came up with, which is when you bury yourself in deeper and deeper knowledge, getting more and more esoteric so that you can constantly feel like you've learned something new, never feeling at rest from how much you know or how much you've learnt, leading to a never-ending cycle, and in my case, leading to a returned feeling of numbness when I didn't feel like I was learning more. While it's true that I read so much, most of it didn't actually help me or even have a sense of real congruence. There is a lineage of interconnectedness between authors and theories, but so many of them either hate each other, are disproving each other's work, or are taking someone else's in a completely different direction that it doesn't feel like a focused field to study as compared to its much more uniform brother and sister subjects, science and mathematics. And obviously, there are so many different branching paths and areas of focus with so much variance between them that getting into it feels like you're constantly doing catch-up, sometimes in needless ways, just to have the proper context to understand what someone is saying. Philosophy is one of the best examples, if not the example, of an intellectual bottomless pit. You gaze into the abyss, and the abyss awkwardly looks away because you've been staring at it too long. At a certain point, a reader comes to the self-awareness that they're contemplating things that have been contemplated and argued for thousands of years, coming to little agreed consensus. Even Descartes' famous quote isn't really agreed upon so unanimously as it's advertised. My library of paragraphs, end-of-book summarizations, and one-liners made me good at talking and understanding philosophy, and the basics of Stoicism, absurdism, and realism had some real pragmatic use, but it didn't really amount to a unified theory or some grand revelation that was practical, let alone something all-encompassing, or let alone virtually anything that could be widely agreed upon. It was a messy collection of cool ideas that made me better at writing, but didn't really help with my life. Sort of drowning myself intellectually in theories and observations, knowledge for knowledge's sake, that over time didn't affect me and more importantly, didn't actually stick with me. Until I found one that did. It's a sentiment that is expressed similarly in various religious texts. It quite vaguely has precedence in modern spirituality movements, and is something that I felt, but never saw expressed, and didn't really meditate on more fully. The phrase is, everything passes. I don't know where I found it. I did not list an author when I recorded it, and it's so generic that it's hard to find an original source. It is very similar, if not interchangeable, to the even more popular phrase, "this too shall pass," which often, incorrectly, gets attributed to the Bible. While Ecclesiastes does deal with similar ideas, "this too shall pass" actually originates likely from a Persian text, a story whose author is debated on, likely either written by Rumi, Sinai, or Attar of Nishapur, details a king assembling wise men to create a ring that will make him happy when he is sad. They come to him with a ring which is inscribed, "This too shall pass," and the king and the request is then satisfied. Its spread in the West is due to Abraham Lincoln using it at the end of a speech in 1859, a year before being elected. Quote, "It is said an Eastern monarch once charged his wise men to invent him a sentence, to be ever in view, and which should be true and appropriate in all times and situations. They presented him the words, 'And this too shall pass away.' How much it expresses, how chastening in the hour of pride, how consoling in the depths of affliction, and this too shall pass away. And yet, let us hope it is not quite true. Let us hope, rather, that by the best cultivation of the physical world beneath and around us, and the intellectual and moral world within us, we shall secure an individual, social and political prosperity and happiness, whose course shall be onward and upward, and which, while the earth endures, shall not pass away." Just like the wisest phrases, like "doubt is the origin of wisdom," "it is what it is," "righty-tighty, lefty-loosey," and "party rock is in the house tonight," its context, origin, and author doesn't matter as much as its universality. It has always provided me with comfort, regardless of scenario or subject matter, even when almost everything else fails, mainly because it's an actual observable axiom rather than just clever wordplay. Like is so much inspirational or observational writing or philosophy, myself included. To be honest, I kind of like that I don't know specifically where or who it originates from. It feels egoless, timeless, and impersonal. Lincoln in his speech is acknowledging the phrase for its genius and worth, but also hopes that we can conjure a spirit so forward-moving and ever-present it never trips over itself or gets outpaced by the nature of passage. Not necessarily a remediation of the natural, but more so a set of principles or ideals that are so strong they withstand the natural erosion that occurs everywhere. And Honest Abe is obviously more broadly and patriotically speaking about the very fresh and new America, hoping that the existing and newly emerging values don't decay and pass due to their transient worth. It is patriotism mixed with hope, mixed with fear. It respectfully wishes what it's commenting on is wrong in its universality, or that there is some unforeseen oversight. It's a way to incite a call for a better new world of ideals that doesn't feel packed with naive optimism, but genuine, wishful hope that it could happen, that together could be built. Of course, every empire that is now in ruins thought they were everlasting and unbeatable. It's hard to believe in prosperous futures or iron-strong ideals surrounded by marble reminders of bygone generations and civilizations, trying to believe in permanence while literally standing among ruins, trying to believe in life while constantly surrounded by death, trying to believe in heaven while in hell, trying to actively carry the torch while seeing it go out. Reality is a lived contradiction to our ideals and will, and raging against the dying of the light could be described as just a poem, but sometimes reality is almost poetic, as the first act of creation man did was harness fire to resist the overwhelming darkness, literally going against the dying of light. Contrast and contradiction paints all of what we do. I live as a soon-to-be corpse that does not want to become a corpse and does everything to prevent it. Art is the constant balancing act of absolute self-hatred and self-indulgence. Lincoln wants to create values that go beyond decay, change, and passing, while existing in a universe of decay, change, and passing. Living in harmony with nature just doesn't seem to be in our nature. Previously, I described this roughly as, man as observed through its spirit and history lives in contrast to everything reality throws at him, a basic tenet's stubbornness against it, as an almost antithesis to its rigid nature. I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment, but it feels short-sighted and selectively Western, as my almost restlessness to fight and wrestle with being at rest is at odds with a lot of Eastern philosophy, which practices detaching from the instincts of the body, being at peace with nature and the natural processes. And "this too shall pass" is a perfect example. The vagueness of the phrase and the generalization of a fits every scenario saying would usually annoy me, but it really does have precedence in many areas other sayings falter. Interpersonally, obviously, whatever ailment, trial, or tribulation you're going through will pass. Your pain, your joy, your sorrow, your current day experiences, your friends and lovers, but also biologically, your body, your sickness, your good looks, your ego, your pride. It stops being just individually comforting and becomes more so a philosophical inevitability. It is not a sign of intelligence to needlessly complicate simple things. My hyper-connected, ever-fast and thinking mind probably overcomplicates very simple tenets that have comforted my ancestors, and I don't want to do that with this phrase, but it is describing the hedonic treadmill in a sentence, but with an air of resolve while still acknowledging its nature. It's weird that something so anti-ego comforts me individually so much more than every bit of writing I've ever read that tried to cater to it, and when it's so applicable to so much more beyond the individual. But it's more so that your negative feelings of loneliness, numbness, and depression are just that. Feelings. They are your body's interpretation of stimuli and reality, but they are not it. They may be what you feel, but they are not you. You are more than your feelings and conclusions about yourself. You are more than your changing states. In the face of conclusion, this too shall pass. So why the fuck did I just drop an overly long personal monologue that completely ruined the pacing? Because, in its purest sense, art and expression can be a myriad of different things, but under the lens of perception, barring biological augmentation, I believe it to be the closest thing we have to escaping not pain, but our solipsistic existence. It confirms something other than the self. Regardless of what you thought of this chapter, I made you understand a little bit of what my life is like for me. We bridged the gaps of solipsism to understand a phrase, my love of it, and my story of numbness. This is the victory humanity eternally has that combats the existential loneliness of being an individual. From leaving handprints in caves, to shitposting, to monologues on stages, to monuments, to paintings, to YouTube videos, to I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, humanity's need to be a theater kid has saved us. Art and expression, while immensely personal, is at a bird's eye view a collection that shows what humanity's understanding of reality and ourselves looks like. Without it, we would truly be lost in only ego and ourselves. But our need to present ourselves, to be seen and see others, I think this is the spirit Lincoln was hoping for that he didn't recognize was already here. Man has a value worth preserving, that he will fight till extinction to preserve. Himself. I have made some bold claims in my short time making things online, and it's time I make another. The most salient, prevalent, other words ending with int question in life is, what is the meaning of life? It's so generic, vapid, and universal that I never want or wanted to touch it, because it almost always boils down to some form or another of existentialism, which is fine, but for a lot of people, dissatisfying. It's not what they want to hear and not what they're searching for while asking it. The question is usually asked in a general sense because of an individual lack of purpose in life or looking for a reason or justification for the cruelty they see. Beyond the badass one-liners, the elaborate theories, and the shit-talking, as mentioned, philosophy both to the student, the teacher, and all those in between, is often people who are lost and want to find some warmth, creating their own fire or framework within themselves to combat the inexcusable cruelty of all they see, and the absurdity of being here. And there is a reason these questions and arguments have been debated and propped up and supposedly solved since antiquity. Besides their open-ended, thread-like nature, it's because their answers are not universal while often advertised for being so, either retrospectively or in their era. Meditation and pacifism can often seem like an undisputed virtue or ideal, turning the other cheek and never wronging someone else, but works horribly in situations of exploitation and tyranny, where authoritarians will giggle as you meditate on the spikes they have up your ass. The recent hyper-grindset rampant individualism I've talked about before, where the youth spend their prime years working multiple jobs and side hustles, blaming themselves to work harder and harder, consuming endless self-aggrandizement to make them feel like a badass or some savant. That mindset doesn't really work for an 80-year-old on their deathbed, numbed on antipsychotics, dependent on an oxygen machine, practically abandoned by the system they spent their entire life working for. The point is, mindset philosophy, its genuine, often pragmatic use, gets overshined by the idea of a golden ideal, that there is a perfect mindset, a way of thinking that's doctrine for all to follow, no matter what circumstance in life scenario or surroundings, when really, it's at its best and most useful when used more like a toolkit depending on the individual and their situation and goals. The one-size-fits-all self-help it has been marketed as, at least for the time I've been born in, is a failure to really see philosophy as an exploration in choice, and instead a script to paraphrase. Imagine for a second if we had such sweeping universality in action. Almost every great revolution would have been stopped if they blamed themselves and went for passivity and accepted what was. And reckless, careless, sometimes even deserved anger or retribution is war's greatest trigger itch. The sign of a great leader and show of character is to know when to have that restraint, not give give in to the sometimes even deserved paranoia or fear and try for diplomacy in times of great tension where there can be dialogue upon opposition or threats. This sounds so obvious, because it is, but the dialogue around philosophy's dialogue is presented like discussing which ice cream is the best, while treated as if once you have tried enough flavors, there is a right flavor for everyone, disregarding diet, personal taste, and fullness of recipients. It's like discounting a culture's entire history, standing, or location, so interpersonal geopolitics doesn't matter, and everything is pure theory detached from reality when discussing it. As if the location or current standing of people doesn't hold weight under political theory's supposed right approach morally or systematically. It disregards reality so it can more so appeal to a theorized universality and obviously fails because the context of its implementation is completely different location to location. I know it sounds stupid, but that's what we've done with our individual lives and our discussions with them. We broadly brush mindset as universal, discounting our own individuality and agency so we can endlessly conjecture to those who differ with unspecific, ill-fitted pragmatic use because it doesn't suit an individual's situation, and not a point to consider in someone's own toolkit. My problem is not that philosophy is not universal, it's that we treat it like it is. It's a subtle pedagogy, or in layman's terms, a theory of teaching, which makes intellectuals into even more elitist pricks than they already are, and self-defeats one of the best things about studying this, which is opening your perspective. Rant aside, I'm going to talk about socialization again, but not under the lens of culture or social media. This time, I'm talking about knowledge and familiarity. Familiarity is a strange default people can fall into that breeds a sense of knowing something fully when you often don't. It can be a limitation we just don't think about. There's nothing inherently wrong with familiarity in regards to knowledge. I feel familiar with my street and my family and my house, for good reason. I see them every day. The outline of what they are has been refined over years in my mind of being with them. I know my body like the back of my hand because I know my hand like I know my body. What is familiar is often not even a conscious choice. It develops naturally as you spend time with something. But when it comes to knowledge about things beyond the interpersonal, it can hold you down from seeing the bigger picture of bigger ideas. For example, we don't question or look beyond certain aspects of existence because they've always been that way for us, and they become an almost default of how we think of life. As if Earth's gravity, time frame, and day-night cycle are just innate to what life or existence is. Instead of our planet being just one among countless others, our mind blanks and autofills life to what Earth is, rather than what the granular nature of what our galaxy and the universe is. Again, this is related to solipsism. Because we only experience our life and only have that to base our existence on, the only thing we truly know of is ourselves and earthly experience. We may have knowledge of that which is larger than us, but self-centeredness is baked into solipsistic reality. So when we conceptualize life, we think of all it is entailed for us, rather than what it is. Familiarity limits us from seeing the room as it is, to only how it is to me when I conceptualize it. Because familiarity does not equal comprehension. It gives the illusion of intellectual and personal satisfaction and security. I may feel familiar with a friend of mine. We might have been friends since preschool, and I'm describing to him the eccentricity of Duck's swimming habits. He is sat opposite to me, pretending to care and listen intently. Everything about the encounter is so ordinary. I don't even know that the cancer cells have already begun multiplying in his pancreas. He will be dead in 5 months, and neither of us know it, but as we are speaking, the cancer is multiplying at an alarming rate. He will keep it quiet when he finds out, which will make it hurt when I only have a few more weeks left with him when he tells me he likely won't make it. Do I truly comprehend my friend at that moment, sitting opposite to him? No. My solipsistic reality and limited, assumed familiarity just makes the situation feel okay, almost as if he is a known variable with unknowable traits that I don't need to think about due to his unchanging presence in my life. With the autofill of familiar when it comes to the idea of existence and the universe, it isn't just wrong, or incomplete, or short-sighted. It's unconsciously prioritizing myself in comparison to what I have learned outside myself or haven't. It goes beyond senses and completely overrides comprehension. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a wholly bad way of thinking, just that it is our way of thinking. As solipsism infects every single thing we do and limits us in ways we will never be conscious of. Familiarity can be a good thing. When I'm playing football with this friend, I know that he likes to rush from mid with the ball as a striker, but sucks at running fast enough to outrun the opposing team. While I play midfielder, I'm good at taking the ball from the other team and passing it up, but I'm terrible at scoring a goal. Through repeatedly playing with him, I know the exact position it is most advantageous to pass it to him for him to score and when not to. And he, through repeatedly playing with me, understands that I won't go for a goal when I'm near it, but am good for setting up a cross. Familiarity allows me to predict and anticipate reaction in a way bare, plain binary knowledge, stripped of personhood, never really could. It's an almost subconscious sixth sense you can have with events and personalities that allows us to function and succeed in a way we wouldn't otherwise. But it does limit me in my thinking. I have to force myself to think outside of myself and everything that gratifies me in modern society. The predictable becomes almost like a dogmatic god, and society treats it like a theocracy. You're not supposed to think beyond this. You're supposed to stick to the immediate, the known, and not what could be. What life could be. What I could be. What is holding me back from that? Is there something more to me? Is there something more than this? It's hard to concentrate, let alone catch a breath to concentrate, in a world busied by the world, living in something ultimately so much larger than the world. Being a person constantly resigned, exploited, and coddled to my instincts, and forced to sit through and participate in endless bureaucracy that doesn't add anything to my life. It's not just that the immediacy of our reality is filtered by the body, but also our understanding of it is so egocentric, and so self-contained and self-absorbed, discarding that which does not apply to us, expressed in the school system, the dialogue with one another, or in the contemporary spoon-fed information platforms that gratifies not just the self, but the individual human reality we live in. The ticking clock of mortality makes us want to rush everything and not waste even a second that is not learning something valuable while wasting so much time doing just that. The endpoint was always going to be split-screen videos, 2x speed, AI summaries, and instant gratification, because the way we have formatted society is gratifying to the solipsistic human reality. It was always going to be making everything even more contained, summarized, and filtered, until the miracle of being alive is commodified until it's boring, predictable, and the ultimate god is your immediate feelings and spoon-fed understanding, leading to a vague sense of guilt that you're missing the point because you were designed to. I know that was a lot, so I will go a bit slower with the same precision. I hinted at it before, but geographically, how much do I, in my Australian forest, really relate to someone living in a desert or a plain of ice and snow? Inbuilt things, Australian things, I don't think about or register, like kookaburras, cockatoos, and bush turkeys. The everyday animal soundtrack of my life just isn't there for anyone who lives in other parts of the world. And to go much grander, with obviously the missing mentioned biggest barrier, Earth itself. In the insurmountable size of the universe, I experience one planet. The limitations of this I can only speculate and can't ever know, almost producing an intellectual celestial claustrophobia in me. Would I actually even relate to someone of my own species if they lived in another galaxy's geosphere? If they had 6-hour-long days and the sky was colored like marmalade? Would their difference in almost everything they experience really be rendered null and void just because we have the same biology? I don't believe so. I think that while we have similar blueprints, and we are made of the same material, geographical locations produce the backdrop of solipsistic existence, and my already limited view can be so different from another's context. It truly does feel like, while we are sharing a space, while we are having the same senses, we are doing so with entirely different conceptions of what life is at almost every level, as we haven't had the context to understand each other's. Understanding, the hardest to talk about limitation no doubt, is paradoxically one of the easiest to understand. If you miss context or can't grasp the full picture of something, you won't fully understand it. As I mentioned at the beginning, no matter how much you learn, empathy fails as a substitute for experience. Or as I put it, even more bluntly in the opening, I will never know what it is like to be a penguin. Communication and information only takes you so far. For example, this video is ironically limited in describing the idea that our perception is limited. My idea that I have in my head, I can't perfectly transmit it verbally in the way it is formed in my mind. I've talked about this before, but imagine for a second if I could. Imagine if all my ideas, thoughts, and videos were transported in a way that defied this limitation I'm always talking about, and you could perceive them in a way that went beyond just language. I wouldn't have to struggle communicating it because I wouldn't have to communicate it. It would be an intrinsic understanding, like viewing a sculpture. You comprehend it before even dissecting it. This is why propaganda is most effective when visual, why advertisements want you continuously looking at their product, staying in your mind even for a few seconds, why so much political discourse in history, but especially since the Second World War, has been making caricatures of each other. Everything boils down to easily understandable aesthetics. It's pre-verbal. Right now, I'm using this as an example of a weapon of persuasion or alteration of truth, but this really could bridge even more of the barriers of solipsism than art does, where someone could view me or just observe me and my ideas unfiltered, free from the constrictions of language and misunderstandings. I wouldn't need to use clever wordplay or try to be funny or analogies or use the story at the end of this video to keep you interested, because the idea would be its purest self. Imagine if you could actually, through the synapses, understand how much someone loves you. You could feel every time you walked into a room, their heart soar and attitude change. This could render our previous forms of communication as an inferior version. This could make every little thing inside us we've always held our tongue, not sure how to say, finally have something even more pure than words. This could change how we view and express everything. And this is just one example. This is pretty basic sci-fi, but it's possible down the line that Earth will just be one form of a geosphere we inhabit, and our innate perspective of what it means to be alive will be completely different than our descendants. If down the line our sons and daughters grow up in a different gravity, alien biomes, multiple moons, and different atmospheric compositions, then they might have a radically different biological and psychological relationship with life itself. It could render a lot of presuppositions about life we have as antiquated or largely incomplete to the point it looks trivial by comparison. People often talk about mortality in only biological terms or conditions, but it applies to so much more than that. Most of our knowledge will die, our references, our dialogue, our intricacies, our metaphors, our shared spaces, our shared connections, our perspectives, our lived essence. The culture you are living in right now will pass, and its lasting remnants will be fragmented, misremembered, and overlooked, like a dementia patient recalling what they did last week. Knowledge dies. It too does pass. And not just culturally. Even if you as an individual tried soaking up everything about a certain broad subject, even if you study it to the point of familiarity, to the finest detail, your brain will remember it differently than it was perceiving it, unconsciously, retroactively filtering out information based on a variety of traits, input, importance, and current priorities. This, again, isn't helped by an education system of standardized testing in which most students forget the contents of the test after taking it, and this obviously isn't helped even more so by the aforementioned self-centered way we gather and retain knowledge. The funny thing about knowledge about the universe is, the more you know, the more you really understand how little you know. It's a species-wide Dunning-Kruger effect where you never actually become an expert. Like repeatedly climbing a mountain only to see the true mountain and realizing what you just climbed was actually just a foothill. Right now, we are stuck at a foothill. We are in a museum gallery trying to find meaning and admiring the garbage bin while surrounded by paintings, then wondering why we aren't fulfilled. Frankly, that's why nihilism and ultimate pessimism has always seemed so silly to me. In your limited lifespan, in your limited time, in your limited experience, in your limited perception, in your limited individual solipsistic reality, you're going to declare the entirety of reality in your species' experience and purpose meaningless or futile. That's like reading one page of a 1,000-page book and declaring the book sucks. Yeah, I understand you don't like the writing, but you can't give a review because you don't know what the book's about because you haven't read the book, and your frustration seems childish and short-sighted by not accounting how inherently childish and short-sighted you at a base level really are in your review. People are acting like intellectual gods just because we memorized our own playground, and it's painful and boring at the same time. Stop being so condescending to your own existence and actually look beyond your biology and experience. I swear to you, the empty platitudes of just be happy and everything happens for a reason hold just as much weight as the surface level observations of futility that has been circle jerked into a gold status of genius. They worship the box they can't ever think out of. This box-loving thinker and his ilk can try convince you to hate your life and yourself, but don't let them. They project their inner hatred of their own existence to the whole of existence while not seeing enough of it to be able to make that judgment. They never think of something beyond themselves. I think there are higher things to me. There are grander truths. There is a vision beyond mine, both intellectually and in the senses, because humility isn't just virtue, it's intellectual honesty. I am being overly facetious here. I understand completely and relate to the dread, the uncertainty, and the certainty, being born from conception into an inherently doomed existence. I can relate and understand why an individual would feel nihilistic about their own life. But to describe that and apply that in a cosmic sense, or to project that beyond our solipsistic individual lives, is so short-sighted because, as I'm really running into the ground and repeating myself and this idea here, we know so little beyond our solipsistic lives. Kant's famous paragraph still holds weight. What things may be in themselves, I know not, and need not know, because a thing is never presented to me otherwise than as a phenomena. Obviously, the human condition has horrifying elements to it that are intrinsic. Obviously, the cruelty nature has inbuilt into it, the repetitious cycle of coming in and out of consciousness, of having a body, of seemingly seeing it all just to lose it all, to love just to lose it. But by hyper-focusing on your own body and never questioning your own existence as a truth, this philosophical hugbox genuinely does feel like a relic of a rightfully bygone era of thinking. That skeleton has been shoved into the sand, skin rotting, but still seen as alive to those that have not seen what life looks like. Schopenhauer is to me what Freud is to psychology students, a foundational thinker whose greatest contribution to humanity was to later be countered in an argument by a better in all ways thinker who thought harder and longer about it before writing his answers. I wrote a now scrapped 30-page essay on the guy, criticizing almost everything he believed in, to later come to the conclusion that he's not worth it, because there is so much beyond wallowing in what we are and what we perceive. With that analogy, critique, and context said, here we arrive back at the meaning of life and my supposedly new, bold claim. That itch to have a more grand perspective, a mind-altering revelation, and the enduring disappointment of digging deeper and deeper and never getting it, the philosophical treadmill. Is it because we are experiencing such an inherently limited view that we couldn't possibly give or produce an answer that is fulfilling? Maybe the dissatisfaction man has is because ultimately he is trapped within the confines of his own perception while knowing it is limited, and because he doesn't truly understand or even perceive his own reality he lives in, let alone existence itself. The answer, or the proper context to formulate the answer, is being withheld from him by his own biology. The solipsistic nature of human existence means as much as he learns and experiences and loves and losses and changes and sees, he will always feel left out from experiencing a grander narrative or something beyond that slice of perspective he is bound to. Perhaps the reason, besides being social animals and intimacy, that man so desires companionship is because it is the closest he will ever feel to something beyond himself, a freedom he will never experience but can so deeply understand. Again, he is alone, together. Are we trapped in our own perspective? And more importantly, I propose Solipsism, where everyone experiences what it's like to be a scallop. Is there a right way to experience reality, or a way that is free without restriction? Essentially, does the inherent nature of being a thing mean we are, in a sense, always biologically constrained to have a solipsistic nature of whatever our physical limitations are, even in knowledge or concept? Does the limitation stretch to our imagination, where senses ultimately become our downfall, because we can't conceptualize what existence is like without them? What if what we would perceive to be godlike perception is actually primitive compared to God, because that type of perception is something so beyond us we can't conceptualize it, only built upon our senses a limited view of what godhood would really be with our senses? What if we're not even on the first level of that skyscraper? What if we're in the basement? We crawled out of the primordial soup and thought the dusty, dirty, dark car park we find ourselves in is all of creation, and the cement ceiling is the sky, and we are rummaging around trying to find the light. Our future is dedicated to building room after room to get a better look at whatever's outside, not realizing that the skyscraper and the building itself is a limitation, and arguably what forever holds us back from being something more than what we are. Everything we build, all our progress, is still fundamentally within a structure we don't even recognize as a limitation. The answer to this problem, if you view it as a problem, is an ethical and moral dilemma that I myself am stuck on. What is man's goal? Is it to be the best man possible within the limits and rules of his own conception? Or is it to break free of that conception and become more than what he was bound to? Regardless of this dilemma, we are becoming transhuman before we've properly started having dialogue about whether we should become transhuman. And admittedly, in this early stage of development, it's hard to argue against it. We've started synthetic biology, made exoskeletons, and as I have mentioned many times in the past, Neuralink and BCIs have had human trials and patients, and a man actually recently regained his abilities to move his limbs. We are already on this road.
Chips are implanted in a patient's brain, and the signals for sensation and movement sent back and interpreted through artificial intelligence, and then redirected to the body and spine, creating a loop that could prove life-changing.
Taking someone who had lost the ability to move their limbs, to sense or touch things and actually feel the sensation of that, to restore those abilities to the patient.
Yes, that's exactly right. We have finally discovered that the signals in the brain are still there and strong even after a traumatic injury.
We watched as Keith managed movements that only months ago would have been impossible.
That's actually sensory data.
From picking up a cup.
What are you feeling, Keith?
Like a jolt of energy.
To navigating a quick bite of Twizzlers.
Got it.
Wow. Last year, surgeons managed to place those chips in Keith's brain in areas that they spent months mapping out, leading to incremental improvements. And then, a watershed moment.
I'm ready.
When Keith actually felt his sister's palm for the first time since the accident.
That was an incredible moment, and there wasn't a dry eye in the lab.
And with 5 million people living in the U.S. with paralysis and 100 million worldwide, the significance is hard to overstate.
It really hit me. In that moment, I felt like he's experiencing something he hadn't experienced in a long time, and that there's hope. There's hope for the future.
In the midst of a lot of misfortune, do you feel pretty fortunate?
Yeah, I do feel pretty fortunate.
A story whose next chapter is only beginning to be told.
Right now, obviously, it's focused on mortality and helping those disadvantaged in life, but that could rapidly change in the AI takeover of so many industries. There is a reality where AI becomes so efficient and dominating in industries that in order to compete in the job market, humans have to begin merging themselves with artificial enhancements. While it's possible that altering human perception comes from a potential product or new optional surgery, or some manifestation or form of an ideological push, I believe it will likely come about as a side effect of survival in a market of rapidly advancing competition. In regards to perception, the reason this hasn't taken off in its baby stages in various products over the years, quite frankly, is because they're always clunky, impractical, and just look unattractive, without a real reason or drive for the experience. They are luxury items. Brain-computer interfaces bypass both roadblocks. Nothing is more intrinsic than the brain, and it doesn't have the baggage of being unusual looking or tied to any sort of fashion, as it won't be noticeable. The drive and reason for such an enhancement will be competition survival, not adopting will put you at a disadvantage. This has happened throughout history in various forms and industries, most obvious being the Industrial Revolution, when hand production was replaced with mechanized manufacturing and automation, and also earlier with the printing press, the spread of knowledge and information being dominated by the written word instead of spoken. This may be the most dramatic in history, but I think it's bound to happen in one form or another. And if it does, again, the side effect of a BCI becoming necessary in terms of work efficiency means it will then open the floodgates for us experimenting with human perception. Not just allowing us to see previously hidden light or bring back the naked eye's vision in those that have lost it, but see new perspectives that might, at such a fundamental level, change how we interact in existence. Maybe, just maybe, breaking the walls of individual experience, where you can literally see the world how someone else does, how their slice of existence looks like, an intimacy that goes beyond mimicking what we think or feel through language or expression. No filters dumbing down communication. You experience the consciousness of another, dissolving the barriers of solipsistic existence. For keen old listeners, this could actually transmit qualia and the live sensation I was complaining about nearly a year ago. In the weird-ass, over-socialized, demoralized AI generation and future generations, perhaps transmitting sensation without adherence is how we pull ourselves out of this media dark age and actually understand how you make someone feel, how they see the world, how a species does. This would also prove and dissolve the inverted spectrum. We could see the differences and thus understand the inversion. It wouldn't be a hypothetical anymore. We could then classify and label the differences individually, and also disprove if there ever was a difference, whether the thought experiment really was just a thought experiment. If you could watch your life from birth to death, if you could record any moment that's ever happened to you and replay it over and over again, have it all stored for someone else to view as a sequential experience, so someone can, in a sense, live through it as you did. allowing us to record conscious experience, how you see it, how you experienced it, without editing or dilution. Right now, we don't even understand what our consciousness really is, so it may seem ridiculously facetious of me to speculate on changing it or transmitting it. But as a counterpoint, we've already started the road of altering our consciousness before we understand it, in a myriad of different fields and ways. I hope I'm wrong about certain sides to this, but speculation about the future of this technology is something all of us need to begin doing, and foresight is almost a responsibility from this point. I know I've harped about this to the point of nausea in my videos, but I remember AI and social media being completely downplayed beforehand and during their beginnings, and seeing it in real time change everything in my childhood and now early adulthood. We didn't have conversations about where it was going or the unforeseen consequences. If we start having conversations now about the potentials of the future of this technology, we can set roadworks, guidelines, and strategies while thinking of potentials before we start dealing with the problems. Not repeating recent history. And we will need to. Obviously, I have been cherry-picking this as an intro for an ideal reality where it allows man to see beyond his limit and only really focusing on that. But without ethical frameworks or do's and don'ts, this could genuinely be the worst step in individual existence ever. That famous joke about man-made horrors beyond comprehension? That's the thing. It's not beyond your comprehension now. Getting ads directly pumped into your optic nerve, never-ending Raid Shadow Legends sponsorships, unfiltered levels of escapism, sexual debauchery and hedonism, the likes of which no one, not even degenerate rulers of old, could conjure up with near infinite resources and autocracy. Artificial worlds you can escape into at any time that are more pleasant, rewarding, and vibrant than natural life could ever be by tailoring the virtual reality to whatever a user wants. This is not just like video games or the baby stages VR we have now. I mean, the body is connected to this virtual reality and perceives through its senses it as real. In the mundane disconnect that many feel in modern society, it's truly possible that it could feel more visceral than real life in some ways. Consumerism just becomes your environment. Your entire life becomes about escaping your life. There are more outlandish things like actual control of the mind, and individual enslavement beyond anything previously in human history. Not just enslaved in a hierarchy, but as in literally, someone can control your limbs if they wish. You think sweatshops are bad now? You think exploitation of workers are bad now? What if they have literally no autonomy of their own bodies, following a routine made by someone else? Meat puppets that are cheaper than robots, hacking into people's bodies, making them perform actions without their volition. Not to mention military use. Long in science fiction and theory has mankind augmenting itself been the next step in ground warfare. Super soldiers. In regards to transhumanism, genetic modification will likely be the main focus, yes. But also, BCIs could theoretically control feelings of soldiers, emotional reactions of soldiers. Artificial adrenaline, artificial apathy, hyperaggression, no more shell shock. Building someone for war, changing their emotional regulation to fit every state or situation you need them to, removing their humanity by downregulating their empathy, their fear, their hesitation, stripping away everything that makes them question, doubt, or resist, a suppression of the amygdala for no fear, oxytocin enhancement for loyalty, making them do things they otherwise wouldn't, make them complicit in things they otherwise would have issues with. And lastly, and most terrifying, tyranny through individual solution. This is much harder to describe, and on paper, under different wording, sounds like a good thing. But it is genuinely one of the scariest, most pressing, and most easy to fall into issues of our time, that seems to be already in the background, mainly affecting young people. Every kid my generation who was fucked over in the economy and housing market by boomers is self-improving to a system that is fundamentally broken and failing them. A lot of them blame themselves, thinking it is their fault, watching people online telling them it is their fault, so that they can sell you a course or a book or get you to watch their podcast. We are in a competitive rat race with little class mobility, bickering with each other, hating ourselves as the oligarchy benefits from us, assuming the game is fair when it was rigged from before we were born. Most of us won't own a home, won't have kids till we are much older than we should be, Influencers like the oligarchy see the utility in individual solution as a method to sell. They exploit the fact that the youth thinks it's their fault and use it to get rich, while selling an almost Hollywood dream that you can get rich, guilt-tripping them to do the same. So it's a cycle. I've talked about this before. It's a quiet trap that develops which views systematic failure like a personal shortcoming, then changing yourself instead of trying to change the system, allowing it to continue unchecked. Now, that's an incredibly sinister and corrosive mindset, but it goes deeper than just mindset. As a disclaimer, this is purely theoretical and something I truly hope doesn't happen, but I want to explore the possibility of, given recent years and current standing. I'm not saying this will happen, it's speculative, and even if it does, it will likely play out differently than I'm thinking. Critique my ideas, think about actual implementation, continuing on. I'm going to quote an infamous thinker. You all likely know him. I've talked about him once before. I will likely mention him again at some point. Just because I use one quote doesn't mean that I agree with everything he says, and I have some clarifications after the quote. Imagine a society that subjects people to conditions that make them terribly unhappy, then gives them drugs to take away their unhappiness. Science fiction? It is already happening to some extent in our own society. Instead of removing the conditions that make people depressed, modern society gives them antidepressant drugs. In effect, antidepressants are a means of modifying an individual's internal state in such a way as to enable him to tolerate social conditions that he would otherwise find intolerable. If you're not guilt-tripped in mindset to wasting your formative years grinding endlessly, so that maybe when you're 40 you can finally buy a house which your parents were able to afford when they were in their prime, then society can modify your innate state to make you okay with it, or at least numb to it. The goal isn't stability or progression, it's making you okay with regression, not being offered a better future, just better ways to tolerate a worse one. Now, I am not saying that self-improvement is bad or medication is bad. That would be a ridiculous, overgeneralized assertion of me. They absolutely have their utility and use and have helped a variety of people. However, if a response to a corrupt, blatantly broken system is to change the individual rather than the system, that breeds tyranny. It becomes a form of control disguised as self-improvement or assessment. The system could keep getting worse and worse, and the individuals in the system will just match the pace. We become complacent with things we otherwise wouldn't be. Endlessly moving goalposts. The system never changes, you change to fit the system. Through mindset, through drugs, and because everyone else is doing it, you'll do it because you want to survive, fit in, and it would be a disadvantage not to. Now, assuming BCIs can regulate behavior or emotions, you likely see where I'm heading with this. You could, on demand, change how you feel about something, how you respond to something, without having to think about it, meditate on it, or deal with it. We could, as a species, edit the feeling of discomfort out of the human experience, while still going through innately discomforting experiences. We endure hardship, but without feeling its weight. Hypothetically, this is the end of free will. This could lead to authoritarianism in a way that really hasn't been written about before, to the extent it should. This could, hypothetically, be the last war. Total enslavement without the totalitarian aesthetic. You become okay with how awful everything is. You will not view the pressing issues of society as pressing because you can almost turn it off. Any sort of revolutionary thinking just dies because you will never feel the need to rebel against injustice because you will feel just. And this wouldn't even feel like oppression. It would feel like freedom, like personal optimization, like peace, artificial peace. Through regulation of emotion or escapism through the virtual or artificial, you retreat into a curated existence where you can turn off unpleasantness. Everyone withdraws into their own reality, their own solipsism. Instead of outright escaping solipsism or living under the constraints of the body's reality, man creates his own solipsistic version of reality. It's escaping human solipsism by creating the ego's version of solipsistic reality. In this reality, he is not alone together. He is just alone. Alone at the center of creation in a reality he created, in a body he altered. If this happens in some way, man's story follows Nietzsche's prediction. He creates context for a reality that can comfort him, for a universe that he fully perceives and understands. He is not limited here, besides the inherent limitations of reality itself and being. These are the sacred games we had to invent. This is the lost man. In breaking free from natural constraints, we might just end up more trapped in a prison, a perfectly optimized, sterilized prison of our own making. where we etch out the unpleasant sides of our lives, where your inner powerlessness at the face of needless cruelty in the world is subdued, or ever presently able to be subdued, by personal and endless self-gratification. You don't have to deal with the guilt. You don't have to think about people in worse off places as you. You don't have to feel an inner hatred or fire at all. Imagine leaders able to sleep soundly at night, even more so because they don't have to deal or dwell on their decisions. They could watch their people starve and not feel anything. You don't have to deal with the existential dread of death or dealing with losing others, because you can ever presently busy yourself from ever truly confronting it. Eventually, this could, and likely would, cause a psychological dependency on the new altered state. You know how people feel naked without their phones in public, or more recently how people feel so insecure with their own writing, they need to check with an AI before sending a simple text message? Imagine that, but with your body, your existence, your perception of self, the world, and this new technology. You feel naked in the unfiltered, original human body and perception. And as a result, buckle up, Buttercup. Your mostly untouched human perception right now, as you're watching this, will be a Luddite's fantasy in 200 years. You are the envied. People will make nostalgia edits about the existence you are living out right now. You are a future Unabomber's example for why the West has fallen and what we lost, what man should have been, untamed, unperverted by technology's greedy fingers. The art we made before this leap will be looked at as a nostalgic reminder of what we are and were in our purest form for what our original existence was. We are the cave paintings, the skeleton of what they become. With original sin, original desire, original mortality, and most importantly, original perception. The incompleteness of it, and the repeated incomplete attempts to capture the total scope of reality within that limited perception. The beauty of seeing man withdraw into himself, alone, together, in something so beyond himself. Wondering it all while seeing so little. Watching our ancestors' stories, their struggle finding hope and meaning in a universe that so often does not give it. What happens when we no longer need to invent meaning against reality, when the system hands us our own reality, when everything is curated, custom-tailored, and frictionless. An iron lung built into humanity itself to prevent us experiencing our humanity. When our very existence becomes a coping mechanism from the pain of existence. A pacification of the inherent rebelliousness of the human spirit, an alternative which is so alluring, no one will ever want to go back and struggle under. My hair is growing, my fingernails are growing, there's blood pumping to my chest, 5.4 million sperm cells are being developed every hour within me, and billions of neurons firing in my brain as I write this out. I'm breathing subconsciously and a million other tiny micro-processes that make my consciousness and your hearing of it work. Processes that were set into motion before I was even aware of myself. A genetic script written long before my first conscious thought. Moment to moment, I am a participant in the unfolding genetic plan encoded in every cell of my being lived out. I will likely, in my entire life, just live under the architectural constraints and advantages of a human body. I can't really imagine existence without the casual feeling of a tongue in my mouth, of a body to manipulate, of an eye to blink, of limbs to move, of water to drink, and food to eat. There is a horror in having organs and guts and saliva and stomach. There is an innate trauma in being, of an ever-present dread knowing that it's one day going to be over, seeing everyone I love become a victim to their own vaguely set of biological fates, knowing that one day I will fall to it as well as all did before me, and so many will after me, and thus I cannot step outside of myself, really. I have human dreams, human aspirations, human lust, human fears, and a seemingly divine longing to be more than it. Funny thing is, that divine longing to be more than it is ironically one of the most human traits. Wanting to be more than being human is remarkably human. No other animal seems concerned with the affair. Chickens are quite content being chickens, worms are quite content being worms. It's just us. I've talked about this before. Man is the animal most in pain because he can't just accept what he is, because he is too busy thinking of what he could be and what he is constrained by. This realization can make a man ponder if even the very act of realizing the constraints of himself and his subsequent reaction to want to exceed it is in his very nature, Is he not just fulfilling that nature? How does one truly rebel or act against nature when he is made up from it and seemingly always under rule of it? How much does the constraint of what I am dictate who I am and how I act? Do I like big titty goths because I like big titty goths, or is it because my body likes big titty goths? Descartes. Essentially, we come down to the argument of free will under the constraints of a body, both in lifespan, emotions, taste, and belief. If I cannot separate what I like from why I like it, am I ever truly free? If I can't separate what's my body and what's me, am I ever truly in control, and can I ever truly be free? My counter-argument against this, to avoid endlessly pondering and questioning until we start questioning definitions, arriving at a grey sludge of off-branch moral relativism that respects any opinion as all being equally right, which is more or less the equivalent to, I don't know, it's just like, your opinion, man, like almost every basic philosophical inquiry inevitably devolves into, is that I don't feel constrained in thought in the same way as language or body or lifespan or time. Thoughts seem so otherworldly, as if separate from the body it comes from. They don't feel as animal or as instinctual or as predictable. They feel both human and beyond it, constructed but not constrictive, unlike so much of the body. The rib cage is literally a cage around the vital organs, a physical safeguard meant to protect, yes, but also to confine it. While it shields the heart and lungs as a sign of strength, it also highlights our fragility and our need for constant safeguarding. The skull keeps the brain from bruising and sloshing around like a skate park, holding the most valuable item in all of its consciousness, a fragile organ that requires constant protection that makes all of this possible. Almost everything in the body feels limiting and limited for optimization of survival. It's as a result very easy to see why people might think, I'm just a lived out predictive formula that's been played out in all different manners of variation, but a predictive, almost predetermined formula nonetheless. But this doesn't feel predetermined. Making this video doesn't feel predetermined. I do feel constrained in all I've mentioned, but fundamentally, still, I feel a type of autonomy. Yes, there are feelings I will never reach. There are lights I will never see. I can only think in a human way, with the neurochemistry that fills my synapses, dictating the release of neurotransmitters and the firing of neurons, shaping every thought, perception, and emotional response. I constantly have to make do and wrestle with primitive instincts made for hunter-gathering while living in contemporary times, instincts that are then exploited by companies, businesses, politicians, and influencers. It's a strange irony. The traits that once ensured our survival now make us vulnerable in a world far removed from the one in which they evolved. Our cravings, fears, and aspirations, rooted in ancient biology, their exploitation slowly being refined into a precise science. They study the way our brains respond to dopamine hits from rewards, attention, or novelty, and use this knowledge, perfecting it into a formula like the DNA it's exploiting from. I will always selectively act out a certain type of representative performance under the guise of people watching it and me communicating it, and I have to filter it all through the beautiful but imprecise English language, which I always feel is doing an exotic tango around what I'm actually trying to say and describe, rather than actually describing it. But still, with all of this and then some, there is a will inside of me that's different than all that surrounds it, that seems different than even the body and organ that produces it, while everything around and in myself and in my biology and in my nature feels constraining, my perception limited, my biology confining. Still, the potential of who I am vastly outweighs my constraints. The potential of man vastly outweighs his conditions. What is and what holds him back could never compare to what could be and what he strives for. I don't think any of this is predetermined, just limiting. The original question, and this Luddite desire that will likely sprout, is weird, because as discussed, the body is already a curated perception. It digests the universe in a way optimal for human survival through senses, leaving out specific parts and amplifying others. For example, your nose as you're watching this video is being hidden and obscured by your vision. Sensory filtering. You don't need to see your nose, so the body has evolved not to. Just like how if there is a hum or white noise in a room, your brain will just tune it out to focus on something else. It is already a limited, curated, and edited solipsistic reality. But by going down the path of transhuman augmentation, by altering our perception, we are going to edit it even further, which yes, could allow us to see more of reality, lights, sounds, and tastes, etc., but we might also tune out things that are intrinsically the constraint of being human and linked intrinsically to who we are. Who we were, what we fought for, like struggle and grief and prolonged feelings of trauma and anger and bitterness that doesn't go away. These things from a bird's eye view may seem like only negatives, but they aren't. Longing comes from the pain of feeling like you've lost something, even temporarily. If you dull that, you don't get fulfillment. You don't get that passionate kiss when you see your lover again due to that longing. You don't get the satisfaction of completing a goal because you've denied yourself the state of being dissatisfied. With grief, even if it hurts, even if it breaks you, with everyone you've lost and will lose, you should miss them. It should be heartbreaking. You should mourn their absence. You should romanticize the times you had with them. It should hurt because it shows how special they were that it does. When I'm gone, I want people to miss me. I want people to feel my absence. I want to have left such an impression they looked for it elsewhere but can't find it. If you never feel alone, you don't have that moment when you look at someone and you know that they get you, like no one else does, like no one else ever could. You rob yourself the alleviation of connection because you've numbed yourself to feeling disconnected. I want to feel disconnected. I want to feel longing. I want to look at a skeleton of another animal and feel despair. I want to lose 5 ranked games in a row for my brother to still say we can't end on a loss. I want to feel pain because it means I still care enough to not want to lose you or get angry or feel existential dread. And if I ever lost that pain or anger or dread, I feel at that point I've lost myself. If we can turn off heartbreak or anesthesize it, aren't we just taking away the impact they've had in our lives? The love we once had for them? The pain we should still feel for them? Would you trade your suffering if it meant losing your humanity? Highlighting and cherry-picking the range of emotions to booster and bolster only the positive? Expanding perception while downsizing the full range of experience? How does that affect our art, our hugs, our kisses, our jokes, our shared grievances, our personal relationship with our own mortality? There is nuance here. I'm not denying it. There are things we suffer from that have no value and have no addition in our lives. Do people with extreme anxiety need to feel on edge 24/7? Do people need to have cluster headaches? Do people with uncommon, unheard afflictions just have to toughen up and deal with it alone? There's no amount of poetry or word magic I can say that could convince someone they should be grateful or revel in having colon cancer. And if this was implemented, I'm sure it won't be as constant as I'm talking about. If we could control our emotions, it would probably be a scenario-based action. People who have a fear of flying could dampen their amygdala's response for the duration of the flight, then readjust it to a normal level afterwards. With grief, people would probably allow themselves dedicated time to grieve, not letting it interfere with work or commitments, but still processing it on certain days. And maybe this will be the more psychologically healthy option in time, and our base way of processing reality will be seen as unequipped for the fast-paced isolation of our new hyperconnected world. We deal with life raw, with no condom, praying to God for no pregnancy, knowing that there are less psychologically risky alternatives we have not yet reached, knowing that it likely soon will be reached. There probably is a best way to live ethically, and I'm not living it. There probably is a healthiest diet right just for me, and I'm not having it. There probably is an optimal path out there, and I'm not following it. Being just intelligent enough to recognize that there is an optimal strategy, but not intelligent enough to recognize the right one. An entire generation infinitely monologuing to itself with limitless information, constantly being sold different solutions. And it does piss me off that my time is just endlessly wondering about it, knowing vaguely that I'm wrong, just not knowing in what way. As everything changes around me, from and what I know as reality and what I speculate as the totality of reality being so obviously limited. As if my entire context of what life is a stepping stone for a future generation to actually find the answers, actually discover what's beyond us, actually see beyond these limitations I'm bound by. It was 1 a.m. I can't even remember the day of the week. Ever since I finished school, I stopped caring or taking note about that kind of stuff, as all the days sort of just blend together. I'm exhausted, but I'm not sleepy. I know I should probably try and sleep soon, so I can at least say to myself I made the attempt, but deep down I know I won't. Like a lot of nights, I'm playing games to occupy myself. I say this will be my last match, which I've been saying for the last 5 matches. It's not that I'm actually enjoying playing, it's that I don't want to go back to the silence and darkness. I can't write, I can't sleep, but the silence gets to me, especially at this hour, so I gotta do something. That something being kind of irrelevant as long as it busies me from being with myself. What I usually do is just binge watch TV shows, read books, or listen to audiobooks while I play some shooter I've played a million times before. But tonight I'm really tired, but still somehow not sleepy, so even games I know like the back of my hand that require some sort of intelligence or moment-to-moment planning are off the table. And I don't have the emotional capacity to watch some TV show or movie. I'm numb, so I turn to the most already mind-numbing but rewarding thing there is, Call of Duty. I load into an in-progress search and destroy match that's already started. Someone left and I quickly find out why as I fill their place. Everyone is being a complete fucking idiot and using the most cursed loadouts a human can possibly think of. Camping before even the bombs have been planted, claymores are placed all around the map, there's like 4 guys intertwined shit-talking badly as if it's their first time in between rounds, causing myself to wish even more that I could slip into unconsciousness. And this is not surprising. I've had a million nights like these. I've had a million games like these. All of them as unmemorable as the next. I know exactly what the next 10 minutes of my life are going to be like. I'm bored by the present and by the future. Every day feels like the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack, and so in between deaths I'm just scrolling, trying to find something interesting to listen to, and I don't even know what the fuck I'm watching half the time. So out of boredom I put on some instrumental playlist I made years back, and I start watching some nature videos. I start watching this one on badass insect fights. Don't ask. And I'm finding it funny because the instrumental I'm listening to alongside it is like this techno fast-paced cyberpunk music as I'm watching these insects go absolutely ham on each other. The round finishes and I spawn again. I die again, maybe I get 1 kill, and I get bored of the insect fights. The process repeats for an amount of time I cannot recall. I switch from game to game, absent-mindedly, not at all really paying attention, as if on autopilot. The insects honestly look like they just want to be left alone, and this guy is forcing them to fight, so I feel bad for watching. I skip the video, going to the next in the random queue, right as the instrumental finishes. And the next video, for whatever reason, was also an animal fight. But not an animal fighting another animal, it's an animal trying to fight for their own survival. It's a video of this little baby penguin separated from its mother, freezing to death, needing to find warmth. All the other mothers have to look after their own, so they can't provide shelter for him. He's just wandering, freezing in this barren environment, looking desperately, as everyone his age is safely tucked away. The baby penguin eventually finds his mum, but the temperature is so freezing that as a survival mechanism, the colony has to group close together to avoid individually dying. As this happens, the father of the recently covered baby is far away, alone, and will be wiped out soon if he doesn't make his way through the blizzard. The only reason he's so far is because he's been hunting for fish to bring back for his son. And the reason he is alone and separated from the other dads is because a pack of killer whales cornered him earlier. The music from my instrumental playlist that I'm listening to alongside it is this atmospheric electronic music that really starts hitting me. I don't even remember when I added it or who it's from, but I start getting this really strange feeling, the type I didn't even think I could feel when I'm this exhausted. The audio and visual peanut butter jelly sandwich that was what I was listening to, what I'm watching, and what I'm badly playing. It starts producing this weird effect on my brain. Somehow, miraculously, the father makes his way to the colony alone and joins them for warmth. They are safe in such an unsafe environment, and the family lives on. It's so common in penguin colonies to have babies that get lost and parents can't find their chick, or the father or mother doesn't return from hunting and the chick will starve to death. Something, be it the music, the visual story, or the fragility of this animal against nature, hit a chord with me, and I couldn't stop thinking about what their lives must be like, the challenges they face, what it must be like in these moments, in an environment and life so different from anything I have or will ever experience, in an instinct that seems so natural to them and unnatural to me. Seeing them so casually be on the edge of death and triumph together as a colony as their environment turns against them. I have this overwhelming feeling of joy and inspiration that completely overrides any feeling of numbness. As mentioned previously, for the past few years I've never felt emotional, but it's almost like I snap out of it. The experience jolts me awake out of numbness, and as the video ends and the song continues, I strangely start thinking about things I haven't thought about in a decade. Memories I forgot were even inside me. Holiday trips being in the back of the car, text messages with exes I haven't thought about in so long, random nights out with friends, getting kicked in the balls accidentally while playing soccer when I was 12. All of it plays out in my head, and I think about how many people I used to speak to daily that I haven't spoken to in years, and I realize that if I were to reach out to them now, we'd have nothing in common. They have an entirely new lifestyle, personality, and the person I used to know is gone. They're just strangers with memories. I start wondering if they ever think of me. My mind darts to how everyone has that. Everyone I'm passing when I'm walking in my day-to-day life has their own memories, hazy recollections of nostalgia for people they used to know, people they used to be. And as I'm thinking about all of this, I'm still listening to the guys on COD coming through my TV, talking about having a pleasant evening with each other's mother, yelling lines I won't repeat, bragging about their KD. And I start thinking about how Even every one of these guys has a personal life I'll never know about or see, and how I could pass them on the street and neither of us would recognize each other. To each other, it's like we have never even existed, and yet right now, I'm listening to this guy defend to his dying breath that he is good at Call of Duty, and the enemy team is terrible. All of this takes place in like the span of 5 minutes, which feels like a second and an eternity at the same time. The passion being brought on by what I'm thinking about translated to gameplay where I'm playing absolutely amazing, but more importantly, I feel fucking amazing, and I want to be doing anything but playing Call of Duty right now. So I get up, drink some water, and try and reflect on what it is I'm feeling right now. I take a nice hot shower and I'm really feeling every single hot water droplet hit my skin. I'm like actually taking in the sensation of the steam filling the room and my pores getting cleaned. And I feel relaxed, but I also can't stop feeling this overwhelming feeling of emotion, like everything right now is heightened, and I, or my body, is addressing everything that I wasn't able to in the past few years. I have an out of nowhere urge to ring my grandparents and tell them I love them, and I'm grateful for every time they served me food or allowed me and my cousins to stay over for a sleepover. I'm remembering the time me and my granddad went and fed bread to ducks and walked in the park and listened to all his old music collection while I read books in the passenger seat. Such carefree, simple times where the weight of what life really is was instead filled with a sense of adventure and getting used to my body and being alive. I want to message my girlfriend and say how I truly didn't think I could care about someone as much as I care about her. How she makes me want to be a better man. How with her I feel like I can be a better man. How every time I think of her I become at ease. How every single moment with her made every bad moment I've ever been through worth it. It's like I feel every thought I usually have bounce around in my head 10 times more than I usually do, and I'm actually processing it in a way that feels right, like this is how it's supposed to feel. Emotions that I just never thought would return to me are back stronger than they've ever been before. It's like what getting your first kiss feels like, or that nervousness before giving a presentation. It's like when the best part of a song is playing and you loop it over and over again because it hits just right, except it's that feeling being stretched out and it wasn't ending. It's like everything the past few years has been background noise verses, and now I'm hearing the chorus. It's like all those feelings were back and I'm feeling it all at once. The ultimate moment of clarity I always wanted but didn't know I could actually have, where my body and the universe is actually letting me process my emotions. And I'm realizing I have so much shit pent up in me I've never even thought about. I've lost so many people that I haven't thought about in so long. I miss hearing my dog run in circles when she realizes it's time for a walk. I miss cuddling with her. I miss that feeling of being completely blown away by something or someone. I can't remember the last time I felt like that. I'm scared of losing my parents. I have like 30 projects I want to finish. I want to write a library worth of books and projects and hate half of them and love the other half. And I just realized that through this, there's a whole universe worth of memories, emotions, dreams inside of me that have been buried for years. There's so much more to me as an individual than I think of. It's almost as infinite as the dark night sky I see through the window beside me. And normally writing a line as corny and stereotypical as that would make me want to vomit, but for some reason, I don't care as I'm writing this in first person. And while I usually can't write at times like these, I practically sprint back to my laptop and start writing this very script. I'm laughing that I had some sort of spiritual transcendental experience as I listened to dumbasses brag about their KD ratio and I watched this penguin documentary. I really start noticing things around me that I just passed without thinking or looking at. The way the moon looks tonight, the way my emotions are overwhelming the cold temperature I'm in, the lights from the city far away. I've since read and listened to multiple people tell me that they've had similar experiences, prolonged feelings of numbness, an indefinite state of the body going through the motions, with a particular event causing the motions to go through the body. It's like a breakdown, but instead of exhaustion, it's invigorating, causing them to rethink how they live their life or lighting the match to make something. My mind starts racing in a million directions. I start thinking about how most of the cosmos is pitch black, but the sun gives us the illusion that it's normal to see light. I start thinking about how once I was the size of 0.1 millimeters, and now I'm sitting here writing this at 6'3". I'm thinking about how I have so much inside of myself that no one will ever and I won't ever understand. I start thinking about how the fuck I'm gonna write all of this I have in my head. Looking back, seeing how this completely innocuous event planted the seed that turned into this massive project that for the past 2 months has consumed every waking thought I have, causing me to read way too much about the limitations of humanity, the differences in species' experience of reality and the potential dystopia of breaking free of it, causing me to have imposter syndrome about how how much I know about life, realizing that's the entire point I'm making. It's so interesting. Every time I write one of these, for like a month or two, it's all I can think about, and no one else besides me and my girlfriend knows about it. And that entire time, I'm like frantically typing random thoughts that come into my mind, trying loosely to make them all glue together, losing my mind, thinking it sucks until the very end, thinking that I lost whatever I had at some point, if I ever had it at all. And I just think about how every writer that I've ever admired has probably gone through the same experience, and all of them push through that, sharing little bits of themselves, and I've had the honor of listening to their words or hearing their song completed. And slowly over time, from generation to generation, person to person, we've built this insane web of knowledge and thoughts from all these different forms of consciousness. And the most important revelation I have, as I'm looking at this city in the very far distance, I realize there really was no instinct to build that skyscraper. It came from dreams of ancestors who lived out their visions, and I get to be a witness to their creations. I exist in so much, see so little. For this brief, fleeting moment, I get to experience this. I get to experience that which they made. I get to look at the stars knowing that I will likely never reach them, knowing that maybe someone down the line will. Right now, it's 2 a.m. and the world is so quiet, and I don't know if this will ever come out, but I'm looking out my window at the city so far in the distance, and the lights flashing from wherever to whoever, and I start thinking about every little thing that's ever influenced me into being who I am writing this. Every micro-action, every forgettable bit of small talk. Every person I've met, truly reflecting on the process of going from childhood to now. I turned 20 this year, and I think about how much I've changed and how many people I've lost, and how I've seen the tiniest micro fraction of what all this truly is.